Well, I'm hoping everybody is here or coming in and had a lovely day. My name's Clare Watson-Spence, and I am the chair of today's panel. It's absolutely my pleasure to be leading this session, the Future Terms session on wellbeing, and to introduce a brief introduction of these esteemed colleagues who are with me. Firstly, we go to Franca, who is the assistant principal at Oasis Academy in Oldham, who is currently leading science in what is known as one of the most improved academies and schools in the Northwest. It's an inclusive academy, and the focus in the academy is on students achieving and excelling. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more from that about that with you later, Franca. And we also have the lovely Laura, who is next to her in my box, and she is the associate deputy head teacher at Bedford Academy. She's also the author of the blog on the gov.uk website on the 4 key ways of supporting staff wellbeing. It's a really insightful journey, and it's all around that development of post-pandemic wellbeing and the use that your school made of the DFE toolkit to support that journey. So we're very lucky to have you here as well with us, Laura. So lovely to see you. And finally, last but not least, Johnny is the CEO of the Education Alliance, which is based around the Yorkshire area, I believe, Johnny, and is also a national leader and quoted as being a firm believer in ethical leadership and keeping schools at the heart of the community. And your Alliance vision is about making schools great, happier and stronger within their communities, and ensuring that people have better lives. So who better than to talk to us today around the issues around wellbeing within our schools and within our communities. So I would like to come to you first, Laura, if that's all right, just for an introduction. I've given a brief overview, but if you want to talk to me and talk to everybody about about you, your journey, your role, and maybe some of the challenges you're facing or have faced, that would be brilliant.
Brilliant. Good afternoon to everybody. So basically, I actually took on the role as leading on staff wellbeing about 2 weeks before we went into the pandemic. So good timing as always. But it's something that I'm massively passionate about as a senior leader. I feel that it needs to be in the fabric of everything we do. So it's not just a bolt on at the end of the day where we actually do wellbeing weeks and where we get to have some team building activities. But it's about making sure that actually, even when we do a learning walk, we're looking at the 6 steps to effective feedback and using the Paul Bambrick model to make sure that you're praising your staff first. And that line management, for instance, is your nuts and your bolts, that you've got an amazing line manager that's always got wellbeing in the structure of that. So in terms of what I've done is I did a blog for the Department for Education, and it was 4 steps of what we look at. And the first thing is actually always giving staff a voice. So we have a wellbeing committee, a workload party, and we have consultations. And then it's driving down unnecessary workload. So constantly looking at having feedback policies are really, really, amazing, that adhere to exam criteria, but that aren't taxing on staff. And of course, professional development. So staff wellbeing, I'm very passionate about, but CPD is what I wake up for in the morning. So everything we do for professional development is based around, for instance, coaching and shadowing. So, it's free CPD. So we do a lot of shadowing, which helps career satisfaction, which makes your wellbeing amazing. And of course, utilising all those amazing tools that are out there, and Anna Freud, you've got the Education Support Partnership. So utilising support there, and we've also, Bedford Academy has created the model policy for the reduction toolkit, just making sure that our staff are happy. So I have read Johnny's book, and I'm a firm believer that if you've got those happy staff, you've got your happy students, and then you're going to get the results. So it is staff first. So yeah.
That's brilliant, Laura. What a lovely introduction there. Thank you for that. And Franca, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thinking about my story and a bit about me is that when I think about staff wellbeing, I think about, me being a mom. So I'm a mom of two, and I know that I'm at my best. When I'm at my best, I can be the best mom that I possibly can be. And it's really trying to translate that and really think about the staffing that we have. And we know that nationally there's a crisis in terms of the shortage of teachers. So when we do have teachers in front of us, it's really thinking about how we can protect them as best as we possibly can. And, and Laura spoke about it earlier, that when we talk about well-being, it's got to be a culture, a way of life, not a Bolton at the end. Oh, let me get you a hot chocolate at the end of the day. It's about what we do day in, day out to make staff feel supported, because if they feel supported, they'd want to stay in the school. We want to retain good staff. And continuity makes a massive difference for the children and the community that we serve. So wellbeing is definitely, I think the pandemic really has brought that to life, how important that is. And when we think about, we've got, as a school, we've got like a wellbeing charter. And we've also tried to talk about things like protecting our weekends. So emails, limiting email communication. So we're talking about at 6 o'clock, try and switch off and cut off, no more emails after that point, to just give people time to switch off from work and have a family life balance. As leaders, really striving to make sure that, when we're setting deadlines, trying to avoid setting deadlines on a Monday, for instance, because that if you set it for a Monday, generally people might be using their weekends to try and make those deadlines. So really being really considerate about people and knowing that work is just one part of our lives. Our family is more important, and thinking about how we can marry the two together to make sure that it's a safe and happy space for staff. The other thing that our academy have is to do with our values. So we operate on something called 9 habits. Those are the traits and characteristics that we want to instill with the children. So as leaders, we need to be seen leading by example and owning and living those habits day in, day out. And I will speak about that a bit more in terms of the habits. But I think generally is that we will be, deceiving ourselves if we think that, well-being for staff doesn't matter, because it does, because they are the forefront really of the drive to providing the best outcomes for the children. So we've got to make sure that they feel supported and they're listened to and they're heard, so that they can be the best they can possibly be in front of the children. And as leaders, we have other responsibilities. So we're not always in front of the class day in, day out, like other members of staff are. So wellbeing is massively important for us in our academy.
That's brilliant, Franca. Lovely to hear that. Where were you 30 years ago when I started? But it's great that that's all come through. And I think you're right when you're saying about pandemic sort of highlighting it. There's a lot of research coming out even today about the well-being of children and the issues on from the pandemic for mental health. So really can't wait to hear more from you, Franca. Thank you. And Johnny, how about you?
Thank you. Yes, I've got the second worst job title in the world after investment banker, multi-academy trust CEO. We don't have a great reputation, so I always feel like I need to start with an apology. But I'm responsible for 7 schools at the moment in Yorkshire, 4 secondaries and 3 primaries, and we also have a skit. And I've made so many mistakes as a school leader. I was an assistant head teacher, a deputy head, a head teacher, and now a CEO. And if I could go back 10 years, I think I would go back and I would stop spending hours and hours and hours in SLT meetings talking about peripheral things like group work versus rows and textbooks and worksheets and whether we should build a science block and all the rest of it, and spend as many hours, leadership hours, as I possibly could thinking about how do we ensure that we have a good teacher in every classroom, because all of the evidence shows that the number one school improvement strategy, whatever the context, whether you're serving an affluent area, a really deprived area, or somewhere in between, whether it's primary or secondary, the best school improvement strategy you can possibly have is a good teacher in every classroom. The Sutton Trust report from 2011 tells us that, the Kraft and Pape study from America, multiple studies show us that. But we spend too much time as leaders, firstly, not thinking about how do we recruit and retain, but also, hopefully inadvertently, but we shouldn't do this at all, is accidentally putting barriers in the way for teachers, and ultimately driving them out of the profession. So our trust improvement strategy is just a single sentence. It's a good teacher in every classroom delivering an excellent curriculum with great systems for behaviour and support. And that's it. That's the job. The hard bit, when there aren't enough teachers in the system, Jack Worth at NFER has shown that we've missed our primary targets for teacher recruitment last year, as well as the secondary targets, which we knew about. There aren't enough teachers, and too many of them are leaving the profession. So absolutely everything that we do as an organisation is, how do we recruit, how do we retain, and how do we train? Franca and Laura have talked really clearly about some really specific processes for reducing workload. We've done similar things. We have a workload charter. Everything that we do is on our website if anybody is interested. The other kind of additional bit that I'll add, because I can't add anything really around workload that hasn't already been said, is the bit around culture. Because we can reduce workload, we can reduce tasks as much as we want, but if the leadership culture is toxic, then staff won't be well and they will leave us. So one of the key lines, probably the key line in our workload charter, is we say we start from an assumption of professional trust. And what we mean by that is that too many systems and processes in too many schools have been set up under the assumption that everyone's lazy and doing a bad job and we have to catch them out. Whereas we all know as school leaders that on any given day, 95 to 99% of teachers are doing a really good job. So changing our structures around to say, we assume you're doing a great job, and what we're going to do is we're going to look to see how we can support you to do an even better job. And it's not kind of softly, because we do still tackle underperformance, we do still have capability processes, but what we don't do is we don't have a culture of fear where great teachers are worried that they're going to make one mistake and slip into some kind of process. So that's really what we mean about ethical leadership. And it's about how do you put the issue of workload reduction into a much bigger context of healthy leadership culture. And again, both Laura and Frank have given some really good specific examples of how they do that in their place. So I'm sure I'll say more during the course of the event tonight, but that's kind of the core of what we do.
That's great. And I'm Clare Watson-Spence. I'm an achievement partner here at Teach First. And I was only speaking to somebody this morning about how I've literally gone, I started school when I was 3, because I think the head teacher took pity on my mum having 3 children under 3. And I was quite a precocious little, I want to come to school. And the head teacher said, yeah, come on in, you can come early. So I've basically been in school, I think, since I was 3, never really left. So I've now been in the teaching profession, so to speak, for 30 years, worked my way through to headship and advisory and things. And my role is working on the Leading Together programme. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you all here thinking about this wellbeing. And over the years, I've seen so much change in that focus on wellbeing, and all for the better. And the other thing we have got is obviously a Q&A. We've already got one question come in, so we will look at that towards the end of the session. So thank you very much for participating. If you wish to put questions in, we would love to answer those at the end. So we're going to start with really our thinking about ourselves and how we manage our work-life balance, because as individuals, we all do it differently. But what is it that maybe you are considering when you are managing your internal in-tray, and how do you make sure that you are within a space that you can support others to create their well-being as well? Because obviously we know quite often leadership take on other people's worries and woes, and that just adds to our own. So I wondered whether or not, Johnny, I mean, you have hundreds of staff members. I'm sure that we're all coming to you for the ultimate answers and that support. And being a CEO, I can imagine, is not necessarily, it's like being a head teacher sometimes. It can be a very lonely place to be, because who do you go to and how do you manage it? So I can only imagine as CEO that is a similar situation. So can I come to you first about how you manage your own work-life balance?
Yeah, thank you. I think the word balance is the key bit. So I tend not to see it as work life, because work is part of life, and also the opposite of life is not work, it's death, which is a bit depressing. So for me, it's how do you achieve balance at work in order that you can then have a healthy life outside work, and I haven't always got it right, and my family will tell you, sometimes they kind of think it's all very well you saying that, but look at you. But I think there's kind of three key bits to it for me. One is that leaders in English schools carry an awful lot of fear and anxiety with them. We've got Ofsted, we've got DFE, we've got the SFA, we've got the media, the local media, school shaming you, and so on. And so the first thing is basically knowing what not to be afraid of. So when I strip down my role as a CEO, I only really have one accountability, and that's to my trust board, or to my trust board and my community. What Ofsted think only matters to the extent that what my trust board think of what Ofsted think. So I don't tend to worry too much about Ofsted, about the DFE, about ESFA, about being school shamed in the local media, because it's everybody's turn at some point, about unreasonable parents and so on. And I focus on, I am accountable to my trust board and my community. And if they want me to lead in this way, and these are the things that they value, and we are delivering them, then I don't really have to worry about the other stuff. I think the second thing is trying to maintain a sense of perspective. So really thinking about, reminding yourself about what your purpose is. Are you chasing a knighthood or a damehood? Do you want to curry favour with the DFE? Do you want to be number one in Progress 8 nationally and tweet about it? Or do you have a higher purpose? Do you want something better? And if it is that you want great schools for the young people that you serve, then, and you're not worried about that other stuff, then you're much more likely to have a sense of leadership well-being. And on those really bad days, you can then just sit back and say, but most of what's happening today in my school or my schools is really, really good. There might be a pile of stuff coming down on me, but actually what I'm bothered about is, are the young people who come to our schools safe, well? Are they being well taught? Are they having good experiences? And on any given day, even the worst days, probably 97, 98% of them will be. And then the last one is about surrounding yourself with brilliant people who will support you and challenge you, and importantly, make you laugh. I am really, really fortunate. My trust team, my team of heads are just superb. I have a team of heads who there's not an ego amongst them. There's no sense of competition. They, apart from when they play each other at sport, when they're an absolute nightmare, and lean on them. I don't have all the answers. During COVID, there were nights when I went home and I have no idea what tomorrow looks like, but somebody somewhere has got an answer, and lean on those people. And the final bit is show your vulnerability. It's okay. You don't have to be indestructible as a leader. And in fact, leaders who have believed in that indestructible model have often either burnt themselves out or have created really toxic cultures. So it's okay as a leader to say, I'm struggling, and to lean on people around you. And the last bit for me is then making time for some golf. That's because I'm an old man, I like playing golf. My GP even said to me, you need to spend a lot of time outdoors to get vitamin D because it'll make you healthy. So what do you like to do to be outdoors? I said, I like to play golf. So I officially have a prescription for golf, which I feel very fortunate about.
I didn't even know you could get one of those. I'm not telling my husband, just in case. he wants one of those prescriptions. That's wonderful. There's some fantastic thoughts there, especially about being vulnerable. I think, you know, in leadership, we often feel we have to be sort of Cyberman, you know, locked in, and I think that's a really important point there. Laura, would you like to sort of add anything there?
Yeah, I think self-care is really, really important. We have like a monthly wellbeing newsletter actually, where we draw on staff's sort of, you know, like self-help tips really, in a way. I meditate, and that's since the pandemic, so I do like the mindfulness in schools project for the students, which actually helps me. It is about living in that present moment, not, you know, overthinking your past and present, which I tend to do because I'm a perfectionist. So yeah, getting it right for yourself first. I've got 2 children, so you know, you have all your strategies you can do at home to make life easy. And I think it's the art of delegation, actually. It's talent spotting. So we have like an expert teacher directory. So I know, for instance, in PE, who's the best at questioning, in English, who's the best at feedback, and we sort of like utilize learning walks and book looks, see who's getting it right, and then that actually acts as a really lovely platform to help like ECTs who, you know, can struggle with their well-being and workload. So I think if you know where you've got that expertise against the teaching standards, you can signpost people to support, because going back to what Johnny said, it is about having that, you know, quality first teaching in the classroom, but it's also about people sharing good practice. So I think a lot of it is about talent spotting, knowing where your strengths are. So, because, you know, we're not all experts in every area. I still look at teaching standards and want to get homework better, because I know that, you know, that's somewhere, even when you get into, you know, SLT, you've still got an area where you're self-reflective. So I think it is about knowing your team, knowing your strength, pulling on that, and and prioritization. So in my diary every day, I have like the 1 to 4, like 1 that has to be done before I leave, 2, you know, things that actually could be done at home and stuff like that. So having that prioritization list helps. And networking. So obviously I've only just gone into deputy headship, and like you said, it does become more lonely. So I'm doing the MPQH with Teach First, and we've got little girls WhatsApp group, like all the ladies on the MPQH have a WhatsApp group, and you know, that actually really helps. And getting into other schools and knowing, oh gosh, yeah, I thought this was really bad about the school, but actually it's really great. And so to get some really real perspective on life, because not every day will be the best of days. So you've just got to live in that present moment and know that, you know, if you're an ethical leader and you're doing the best for the staff and students, then you need to be, you know, celebrating that. And yeah.
That's great, and it's a lovely use of that novice expert continuum, where your you know, your experts can help your novices, but actually in things like the new research that's coming out, quite often your experts are your ECTs, because they actually are being fed all that knowledge, especially about science of learning and cognitive and often about well-being. They often hold the key rather than the people that have been in it as long as I have. The 3 children I never saw. I see more of them now, which is nice, but at 23 they still need you. There's the element of hope. But yeah, you're right, making sure that you're using the expertise within. It's not always about somebody coming in and say, do this better and do it this way, because actually it's your school, your ways, and developing that way. I think that's a really sensible suggestion there, Laura. Thank you for that. And Franca, some lovely suggestions we've heard. What could you add to this?
Yes, there's been some great suggestions so far. I think from my perspective, in terms of managing my own well-being, is just some practical things that I've learned to do over time, is making sure, number 1, no emails on my phone. You know, sometimes I remember previously, I think, all right, I'll have it on my phone because then I can look at all the emails and that makes me more organized. But actually, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. So taking that off has made a massive difference to me. Where I can, thinking about the routines, building a routine for me. I think as a science teacher, I like routines and structure. So for instance, on a working day, I might say I'll work Monday to Friday, but then as soon as it gets to Friday, I'm protecting my weekends because I deserve that. So making sure I protect my weekends, planning in activities that I can look forward to with my friends and my loved ones and some of the colleagues from work. Has been really, really helpful for me. Also, one of the things that have been really, really useful has been having a leadership coach. So for today, for instance, we've had a challenging day, lots of staff off, so having that moment to just have a stop moment with my leadership coach has made a difference to my well-being. And when we talk about stop, we'd say the stop stands for S for step back, T for think, O for options, what are the options? And then P is to proceed, or thinking about what actions you're going to take moving forward. So what I always do is that no matter how busy my day is, I always plan for moments to just have a stop moment. And whether lots of things are going on, just that stop moment for me makes a difference. And really at this time of year where, we're getting closer to the end of term, it's like bring on Christmas, it's about thinking about our energy management. So really, because I know that I'm not as effective when I'm tired. So really thinking about how can I oxygenate myself first so that I can be available for others? Is that when you think about in a plane, if they say if something goes wrong, you put on your oxygen mask first, and then you then go and help others. So really thinking about energy management, and what's really helped me with that is DPD. So what am I going to do? What do I need to park? And what can I delegate? And I think it's important, that element of delegation, because as a leader, sometimes when loads of things are happening, you want to do it all yourself. You want to fix everything. But actually, if I do not delegate, I'm robbing someone else from developing and robbing them from that opportunities. So really thinking about that as I manage my day-to-day well-being. And I think last of all, I'm a mom of 2 young children. So even if I wanted to work all the hours in the world, it wouldn't even let me do that. So it's about balancing that as well. And it's really nice to remember that no matter how tough my day has been, remember that actually it's a privilege doing what I'm doing. And when I look around, the community and the area that we serve, it is a privilege doing what I'm doing. And I try and remind myself of positive stories of the things that I've had a positive impact in. And that really, really makes me feel better. And finally, I would say that my faith really helps me to remain hopeful and joyful. And the 9 habits that we have and our ethos as a school really helps to remind each other of that. And knowing that, I think Johnny talks about being vulnerable, is knowing that, having an open, honest conversation, finding a colleague that you can be, you can trust and say, do you know what, this is a day that I'm having, offload, and then know that you can press the reset button to start again. So those are my tips in terms of how I manage my well-being. And as Johnny said, it's a work in progress. I don't think I've ever got it where I said, I've got it 100% absolutely right. I just know that there are different times of the year where I'm required to work more, and different times where I can, pause and just reflect a little bit. So it just depends on the time of year and the challenges and demands that my role involves at that particular moment in time.
Yeah, I think I've never heard of energy oxygenation before, but I'm going to do some now. And when we're doing coaching sessions, we often think about our recovery and how we make our own, what are our threats, what drives us, and what our recovery is. But often, one of the activities I'll set for group coaching around that would be to book a date in the diary tonight with somebody who brings you some recovery. And actually, when you go and meet with them, talk to them, you feel that sense of, actually, I'm doing this for me, and I'm meeting up with a friend from school that I've known for, I daren't say 40 odd years now, because it just makes me feel old. But you meet with that person, you fall in, you drop in, you talk about playing netball or hockey, you talk about the kids, you talk about something that's not school, and actually you reconnect with you as a human rather than you as that machine in school that's busy all the time. So I think just amazing strategies there from all three of you. I'm just in awe of all those things that you're doing for yourself, which, you know, that mindfulness, the oxygenation, you know, that vulnerability, all those things help you to do the jobs that you're doing in school and very successfully. So that's wonderful. So in terms of being a leader in schools, I'm sure that you are always concerned about the well-being of your staff. So what sort of strategies, we've sort of heard about pillars and policies and things, but what is it that you do and your schools do to help you manage other people's well-being and support each other? So we've got these sort of novice experts for CPD. Do you have the same sort of things for well-being? Do you know? So I'm very interested in hearing, and I appreciate, Frankie, you were the last to talk, but I'm going to put you in first on this one, if that's all right.
That's fine. So in terms of managing the well-being of staff, is number one is really having clear structures in place for line management. So no matter how busy things get, really making sure that everybody's had the opportunity to have a line management so that if there's any issues, any pressing issues, they can raise that in that channel. Because often people get really frustrated when you do not have an outlet. So making sure that that's in place for staff. The other thing that we do to support well-being is really saying to staff, what are the barriers? So what can we do to remove the barriers so that you can go in and just do your day-to-day job? So it's almost, what can I help? How can I help? What do I need to do? You know, how can I, do I need to cover a lesson for you to just give you a moment? So really thinking about that servant leadership. And yes, it's really draining on us as leaders, but, my principal always talks about the fact that we make the weather. So no matter what's going on, we always need to make sure we're joyful and we smile and we wave and making sure the staff feel supported. The other thing that we always encourage staff to do is that when we ask you to do something and you feel overwhelmed, is saying, okay, that's fine, but what is it that I can then, park so that becomes a priority? So I've given you something to do. Is it a priority? Yes, it is. And what can I park so that I can do that and really achieve that? And one of our habits I've been talking about the 9 habits, but in our school, the 9 habits are patience, self-control, joyful, hopeful, humble, compassionate, being considerate and forgiving, and really thinking about how we can demonstrate those habits to one another. That really is part of the ethos of the school in terms of supporting staff well-being, and little things like where we can, do we need to have a briefing? So when we've got a briefing scheduled, if there's nothing really major that we need to say, giving people that time to go and do planning, time, everybody wants more time. So where we can, how can we give you the time to actually do the thing that you do best? Other things that we've done is where, we even stuff like sitting together, having, coffee and lunch together, facilitating that so the staff have that opportunity to speak to one another, because often you work in your bubbles of departments, you never get time to see each other. So where we can, making sure that we're encouraging people to, have a moment, have a time where you can just sit and reflect and do the things that you're passionate about. And you know what? One of the best things about well-being is having a laugh in school. So where we can, thinking about how we can bring joy. So recently we're thinking we've got 12 days, till the end of school term. So thinking about what initiative can we do every single day, getting staff involved in it so that we can just have a nice laugh, because we can't be all too serious all the time. No. And then I think the other strategies that we normally have is the things that I do. So I always say to my team, what do you need to do? What do you need to park? What do you need to delegate? And, when you see people being overwhelmed, is saying, you know what, just come and sit down. Just come and sit down. Don't worry about your lesson. Come and sit down and have that moment. And I think as leaders at times, things can get so busy that we forget the power of just listening. So we encourage each other to just be active listeners. So where you just sit still and just listen and just absorb whatever that person's feeling in that moment. Because often all they need is just to have that outlet and then they're fine and they can just get on with their day. So really being an active listener and always looking and making sure that staff are okay. So those are the things that we're doing, to encourage wellbeing in our school.
Fantastic. We do that for our children all the time, don't we? And then all of a sudden we think, oh, actually, our children, our staff also need that. So yeah, some lovely suggestions there. Thank you, Franca. Johnny, what about you?
I mean, I go back to kind of achieving balance and perspective from the first question is kind of the starting point. Then I think it's really, really important that we focus on leadership well-being and our own well-being. But in order to do that with credibility, we have to demonstrably show that we're serious about tackling that for staff. There's nothing worse. I know of a school where the head appears not to be, he pays lip service to workload, but not really, and then says, on a Friday night, I don't want anyone to contact me till Monday morning, which is absolutely fine if you've got the credibility because you tackle it for other people, but it's not if you haven't. So being really planned and systematic about how we tackle workload and well-being for staff, doing it really properly, establishing that culture of professional trust. In our trust, I lead that work, and I think that's really important. I'm the one who meets with staff regularly in schools. I talk to them or ask them about what their real lived experience is in our schools. Whenever I go into schools, which is all the time, I make sure that I talk to the caretakers, the lunchtime supervisors, the cleaners, the admin staff, because if you want to really know what the culture of a school is, they're the people to talk to. And then, so we did all the work around workload, and that conversation is really just me saying to people, give me anything that we ask you to do that you don't think has an impact on outcomes for young people. And I will come back and I will be the one who faces it up. And either I will say, look, we've looked at this, here's the golden thread, this is how we think that it does, and therefore that's why we need to keep it. And if I can't show you that, then we'll get rid and we'll abandon. So we did all of that, but then the last kind of round was then sort of going beyond that and saying, right, it's a very, very, very long time since I taught 22 hours out of 25. You're going back a long, long time. And, I was talking to some of my sort of leadership colleagues and saying, we need to actually ask and understand what that day is like when you come in the morning and you're teaching 5 periods and you've got a break time duty and you're running a club on a lunchtime, there's a staff meeting after school. And by the way, you've got a 5-period day tomorrow as well. And your next free period that you can see is Wednesday afternoon. So we talk to, and then getting beyond the kind of narrow confines of institutional school thinking. So we talked to staff and said, what could we do to make your life better? And frankly, we didn't have many great ideas because people immediately would have an idea and then go, oh, but you couldn't do that in a school. Oh, but you couldn't do that in a school. So breaking down that kind of traditional thinking. So we ended up, we've done we've refurbished staff rooms, which sounds a bit, a bit silly, but we've got nice IKEA furniture. We've got rid of all the crockery. We've got proper crockery in, proper coffee. There's an absolute insistence from our staff that it's Yorkshire tea. It has to be Yorkshire tea. I don't know why as Lancastrian. But then a really silly little one. Loads and loads of staff said, look, we do all our shopping online. We work full time. We do all our stuff shopping online. I've got one of those post people who won't leave it where I ask. And I'm forever having to spend all my time at home, traipsing off around town, looking for where my parcels are and all the rest of it. And if I buy something that doesn't fit and I need to send it back, I can't do it till Saturday. And then it's a nightmare and I forget. And then this was a genuine cause of stress and annoyance for a lot of our staff. So we just introduced a parcel delivery and drop-off service, so we basically said, look, bring any parcel you want. We'll take it to the post office for you, get stuff delivered to school. We'll have a drop-off point near us. And it's just daft stuff like that. You do all of that, then people will not resent you when you say, yeah, but I've also got to think about myself. I've got to think about my own needs. I've got to think about my leadership needs. And then final one, something that Frank said there, that thing around kind of a coach or peer support or all the rest of it. I've got a group of 8 or 9 CEOs, CEO friends. It sounds really dreadful, but they're lovely. And we just have a WhatsApp group and, we look after each other, and it can be professional. It can be, has anyone got a policy on this, or has anybody done this piece of work before? Everybody falls to help each other out. Or, it can just be like, I'm having a really bad couple of weeks and I don't know who to talk to. And then your phone starts ringing and they're all, on the phone. So that peer support, I think, is really, really important.
I think you're so right with all of those points there, and that peer support is more important than you think, isn't it? And you know, that feeling, again, going back to that vulnerability, you really have to dig deep to admit that you are not doing the best job that you need to be doing, or that something's in your way. And actually,
can I just come back in on one more thing, just on Laura's,
yeah, of course you can.
You mentioned, because it just reminded me that I used to, I'm not saying whether I still do this or not, but I've got my to-do list. Then you end up doing loads of things that weren't on your list. So writing them at the bottom and cross them off. Make you feel better. I do that all the time. I might not have done my list, but I've done loads of stuff and I've got loads of crossings. Anyway, it's a sad little thing, but
well, it's that three great things to be three things to be grateful for. I mean, I have the app on my phone and it comes on at 9 o'clock at night every night, and I never type into it, but I always think about those three things. And sometimes they're work related, and sometimes they're just home related, and something wonderful has happened, or you know, the dogs have actually got out for the toilet rather than using the conservatory, which is always a positive. You know, those sort of things, just the little things that you remember and you keep in your mind that these things have happened today, and they're good things. So Laura, anything further to add to our conversation here?
Yeah, it's all been so amazing, but it is all about the staff voice as well, isn't it? We hear a lot about student voice, but it is that the staff voice, and the two simple words is about time and talk, really. So we have like 3 areas. We've got a staff wellbeing committee. So it's from different department areas. So there are people, you know, that are in the kitchen, people from facilities. So we have this committee, and we actually do plan wellbeing weeks every term. So we've had like staff golf and a Korean chat, tea and talk, you know, like bake-offs and stuff, to have a laugh, because it is good. And even in the pandemic, we did a lot of that. So we did like a bake-off online. We did an art class where we all like drew pictures of ourselves, like on Teams. So there's a lot you can do. And what really hit me was when a lady said to me, do you know what, when we had that like little tea and talk on Teams every Friday at 11 o'clock, it got me through the pandemic. I said, oh, what? Because, you know, she was on her own at home. And it was lovely, actually, because during the pandemic, one day we'd have 20 people coming, and like all our kids would be like climbing all on us and everything. And then, but sometimes there'd just be 2 of us, and we would just literally talk and listen to each other. And that is so, so powerful, although it sounds so simple. So although it could seem like a bit of a bolt on, these wellbeing weeks every term actually really work. So we get different people leading on them, and it's just a nice way to see people from different departments. So the wellbeing committee sort of organise them. We've also got like a workload group. So every term I get a cross section of staff at random, and we just fill in the DFE workload survey, just to touch base on how we're doing as a school. So we do that as well. And then we have consultations. So I know you know our amazing head teacher, Christella, where we touch base with staff. They pick the 6 areas and we just consult on that. And the power of a survey. I think surveys are really good because people come out with a bit more than they might do in person. So every year we do like the Ofsted type survey. And then what I've just introduced this year actually is I look at the outstanding criteria, so the different areas. So for instance, quality of education, behaviour and attitudes. And what I've done is I've created a self-assess type questionnaire linked to the outstanding criteria of Ofsted, just to touch base with how staff are feeling against, you know, like our big old framework. And that's not for Ofsted, that's for just to check in, you know, that obviously it's a really good framework there. So just to check in on how staff are doing against that, but it's in a self-assess type way. So that's something I've designed this year. So just, yeah, all about the staff voice, listening and having chances to talk. But yeah, I really like the idea about what you said about the whole stop, where you know have times like that in the day. So that's definitely we'll introduce in our school.
Fantastic. And of course, this session today is all about sharing our ideas. And I've never met a teacher or a leader who hasn't stolen something from someone else to make things better. And I think that's the whole nature of our profession, is the fact that we see something, we grasp it, we do it, and we take it and adapt it to our children, our schools and our communities. And I think that's a real beauty about that openness and that sharing. So in terms of when we come across teachers and staff who are maybe struggling and having some difficulties in managing, well, obviously we have our importance of wellbeing from our trustees, our governors, our senior leadership, but obviously there is that element of leadership that pushes us a little bit into fixing rather than self-care and developing resilience. And a lot of leaders that I come across struggle a little bit sometimes with, you want to help, you want to give, you want to do for, because that's what we are. We're a caring profession that does. So how do you as a school and as staff and maybe as a person manage that sort of developing resilience with your team against that providing sort of the answers or fixing problems? Do you find that easy? Do you find that a challenge, or do you feel that you have everything in place to make that work? So I wondered whether or not Laura, you might start with us on that one.
Yeah, it is hard, isn't it? Because you just want to go in and offer them the solution. We have got a great assistant head teacher at our school, and we've started doing coaching through the GROW model. So that, because it actually gives them a lot of power, doesn't it, if they feel that they've arrived at the solution themselves. So yeah, it's with wellbeing, it has to start with the individual as well. Obviously that people need external support as well, but so you've got to make sure that they're resilient as well. So coaching is a great way to do that, and of course there's different forms of coaching. So there's, at the moment we're doing like the specialist coaching, but we are going to look at doing some co-coaching and some like triad work where with the walkthrough books. But yeah.
Brilliant, super. And Franca, how about you?
I think that at times I do have a tendency to just, jump in and fix things and make things better. But recently, when I was having a conversation with my coach, what really resonated with me was talking about the fact that when you try and jump in and fix things, you're robbing that person the opportunity to actually develop. And so when I think about it now, so rather than, my instincts of jumping in, it's really thinking about, actually, this is an opportunity for that staff member to really develop with my support. So, and we talked about, a 4-stage approach where, you say to them, in our relationship, as we're developing, there might be stages where I'm telling you what to do. There might also be stages where I'm just providing you with support, or I'm coaching you. Where in this grid do you think that you're at right now? So you have that mutual understanding, so that they know in either way that at some stages you're going to be supporting them, or sometimes you need to tell them. And so in terms of building their resilience, it's really thinking about that and thinking about, right, when do I need to step in? Or actually, when can I just allow them to carry on, to steer them in the right direction, but ultimately they're accountable. And it's like, even I always go back to the analogy of having a child. When do you allow them to make their own mistakes in a safe manner? But sometimes you need to let people to fail, because then they learn from that. So when I think about that, it's about not robbing people the opportunity to develop. Yeah. And that's the major one in terms of developing resilient, but also celebrating successes as well. So when they've been through the struggles and the challenges and they've gone to the other side, really celebrating them and championing them and saying, look, you didn't think you could make it, but look at how much you've come on leaps and bounds, how much you've achieved. So really celebrating the successes as well, to help them really own their decisions. And also is that whole idea of distributed leadership. I don't have the answers to everything. So actually, it's really important to empower other people. And in that way, when you empower other people, people just really surprise you. Even the staff members that are always quiet, they really, really shine, and giving that other people the opportunity to shine. is really important in the process of building resilience.
I think that they're fantastic ideas and a great way of using your leadership skills to develop others. So, Johnny, what would you say to that?
I agree with everything that's been said there. I think I've not used these words, but I think I might do as of tomorrow. That I and we as leaders will do the policy stuff. So you bring stuff that needs to change, and we'll change the policy. But you have responsibility for how you behave towards yourself and towards others. So, specific examples. Through listening to staff, we got rid of 3 target performance management. We got rid of performance-related pay. We've got rid of threshold and onerous application processes and convoluted pay decisions, mainly because I was bored of them. But it was occupying a huge amount of time for no real benefit at all. We saw no link between that and raising standards. So that's stuff that, a third-year teacher can't do. But what a third-year teacher can do is behave well towards themselves and behave well towards others. A lot of the stress, anxiety, and poor well-being in schools comes from interactions of adults to adults, and that can be leaders to staff, but it can also be staff to each other, or indeed it can be staff being horrible to leaders, because we are human after all. So things that, things like, we changed the policy to say you can absolutely must go to your child's nativity, but we say the starting point in terms of cover needs to be, can you sort it out in your department between yourselves? Can you help each other out? And if you genuinely can't because there aren't enough people, then we'll get cover. So don't trip that good policy up by being mean-spirited about it, or, whinging because people are allowed to take their PPA at home and you happen not to be free on a Friday. That's unfair. Well, yeah, life's unfair, but the alternative is we imprison everybody on site, or we now pay for everybody's repeat prescriptions. So if somebody's on antidepressants or HRT or asthma inhalers, we pay for the annual certificate. We ask people not to whinge that they're missing out on £120 if they're lucky enough not to be on medication. But it's amazing, when we got rid of 2-year progression at upper Pacebine and made it annual, we had a member of staff who came in tears and said, that's not fair, I had to wait 2 years. They should have to wait 2 years, so that toxicity doesn't always just come from leaders. So really just saying, you take responsibility. And the final bit is, how often when you talk to staff about workload and they're talking about things that they're doing that nobody is asking them to do, and I don't want them to do, so over planning, over marking and all the rest of it. I can't save you from yourself as an adult. You have to make sensible choices. Our marking policy does not require you to be marking every week. If you choose to do that, I can't save you from yourself. I can just urge you not to.
I think you're so right there. We have got a responsibility for self-care and for looking after ourselves. And I think in that resilience and sort of the fixing, we have got that responsibility to develop and grow that resilience in our leaders as and when we can. And I think, yeah, you're right about the, people will see the unfairness in anything. I think, Johnny, when you're in leaders, they will see that. But we have had a question come in from Lynn who sort of says that that they've seen anecdotally on social media so many stories of seemingly poor leadership impacting on teacher well-being, and asks about how important leadership training is for SLT in the aims of sustaining high levels of teacher well-being. How can we make principals ubiquitous in this profession? So I wondered whether or not in ways of answering that, we can talk about maybe our top 3 things that we might say in terms of what your legacy might be on well-being, but the top 3 things that you might advise went into training, or when you have new leaders coming through, what 3 things might you say are the top 3 things that they need to do, develop, be aware of in terms of ensuring the well-being? So in terms of the things that you've done in your own schools, in terms of your legacy, what top 3 things maybe would you choose to pass on? And I think that would answer Lynn's question there in terms of, you know, what training do people need, and what is it that you've done that's made a difference, and that can pass on and carry on through when you're not even there. What would be there? So I'm wondering if we went to Johnny first. Could I ask you to answer this one first, Johnny?
Yeah, I think in answer, it's a really good question. And I think you can have leadership training, but you can only have that if you've got something, a set of principles or behaviours to train around. So absolute number one, probably number 1, 2, 3, is have an ethical leadership framework or leadership behaviour expectations. We've got a really clear framework. And you can then, with that, you can then recruit around it, you can develop around it, you can have performance development conversations around it, you can have training around it. And, you know, the training can be just down to kindness is one of ours. You can spend hours having great conversations in groups about, you know, what does that actually mean on the ground? And talking about, you know, what behaviours does that preclude and what behaviours does it require? So I think kind of generic training around leading well will fail unless there is a framework to do it around. And I think, you know, that for me is the key bit. I won't get onto the legacy bit yet, but I'll stop there and let the others.
That's lovely. I know I'm aware that we have 5 minutes. So Laura, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm not mute. So firstly, I would sign up to the DFE Wellbeing Charter, because there's 11 points there that will help you, like help leaders as well, structure what's going on. So I think that charter is a really good like starting place. And again, back to the nuts and bolts, line management. So we have clear questions, actually. Obviously, we don't always adhere to them, but we have like a framework for great line management and tips of what that looks like. And just being really evidence informed. So make sure that there's potentially a wellbeing working party, workload, staff wellbeing committee groups. So lots of like spaces where you actually can talk about wellbeing. So I actually think it is good to sometimes talk about wellbeing. I know other educators might disagree, but yeah, and just always sort of looking at the research that's out there. There is so much out there now. Like I'm always going on Place to Be, Anna Freud, you know, there is a lot of stuff there that we can get, and just making sure that people are exposed to that information. Yeah, thanks.
Wonderful. And things like a lot of schools I'm working with are using Audible as a vehicle, because they're not necessarily in the time space continuum to have books on the go, especially with young children, where you may have to supersede a Roald Dahl with an education on Freud, but you can, you know, listen and absorb things while you're driving in and out of work, and things like the Andy Cope books I found have been quite good. The Art of Being Brilliant and Being Brilliant Every Day sort of sets you up for a good day ahead, because they make you think of all those great things that happen. Franca, what would you say?
Trying to narrow it down. You know, it's interesting when you asked that question. I was just making some notes, and the words that came to mind was thinking about relationships. So that's from student level, staff level, really thinking about how you can foster positive relationships. I've also got down simplifying systems. Do the systems need to be complicated? Simplify the system so that it makes it easier for everybody to understand, because when there's a lack of understanding, you know, things just fall apart, and it's not down to people not wanting to do them just because the systems are very complicated. And it's about removing barriers. Is whatever we've said that we're going to do, is that making a difference to that child? Is that going to make that child a better individual? Is that going to promote a better outcome for them? If it's not, then why are we investing time and energy on that? And lastly, is to think about the ethos of the school, and, you know, making sure that as a leader, you remove the ego. You know, there's always opportunities to learn from everyone, even from the students, from the cleaners, from anybody, you know, that opportunity to learn. So removing our egos and knowing and really being open and active listeners and wanting to be better for ourselves, for our school. And then I thought I'll end with, the ethos that we operate on as a school, which talks about a passion to include, talks about a desire to treat people equally, respecting differences, a commitment to healthy and open relationships, a deep sense of hope that things can change and be transformed and things will get better, and a sense of perseverance to keep going from the long haul, because ultimately we want our children to achieve their God-given potential. So I think that when you have an ethos that people buy into, all of those things will fall into place.
That is such an amazing place to end, and I don't really want to end it because I think we're getting into some territories that are just amazing. Listening to your development, your what you're doing in schools. I think we've been very, very fortunate to have the three of you here today to share your expertise with us, and all those fantastic ideas. And I love the fact that Johnny's already got some ideas to take back, and I'm sure I have too for the work that I'm doing. And I just need to say, Johnny, Franca and Laura, you are absolutely brilliant. Thank you for giving your time today to discuss this together with us and with our audience, so to speak, our other participants that we can't see because they're in the invisible ether. But again, thank you so much, and thank you to Kerry for organising it all as well. I know she's sort of off screen at the minute, but we can't do these sort of things without these people. So thank you again, and I think your Twitter handle, Johnny, is on the future terms, and I think Laura, Franca, are you tweeters?
Yeah.
Yes, so we can catch up with you, and if there are any further questions, it would be lovely for people to be able to, if that's okay, to reach out to you on those. But I will sign off. We are 5:01. I was nearly there on 5 o'clock, but I've so enjoyed listening to you, and thank you ever so much, and have a lovely, lovely rest of evening and a great Christmas. Last one before Christmas. Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.